The International Newsnet World Report is a national television news show available in more than 30 million homes. We broadcast daily real news the networks won't tell you. We are solely viewer-supported. That means you. You can donate at our website, INNWorldReport.net. We hope you find the following interview informative and helpful.
In October 1969, the Strategic Air Command was ordered to increase the number of nuclear-armed B-52 bombers on ground alert and have B-52s take off from bases in California and Washington State and fly in oval patterns towards the Soviet Union and back on 18-hour vigils. These missions were picked up by the Soviet Union's intelligence agencies but deliberately designed to remain secret from the American public, and did so for 34 years. In 2003, two professors, Jeremi Suri and Scott Sagan, published a paper entitled The Madman Nuclear Alert. Just last week in Wired Online magazine, University of Wisconsin history professor Jeremi Suri released an article called The Nukes of October, following his book Henry Kissinger and the American Century. He now joins us on the International Newsnet. Welcome, Professor Suri.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be on.
This secret was kept for a long time. You've just written an article. What's new, and why is this being released now?
Well, there are a number of new things, the most significant being that until a few months ago, we did not have the material from the Russian side on this. And while we still don't have everything, we have a little more now than we ever had before, and we have a sense that the Russians saw this at the time and that the Soviet leadership did indeed react to this crazy maneuver by Nixon and Kissinger. The other new thing is, I think we've come to recognize now that Nixon and Kissinger were performing a number of things in office that the American people didn't know about, and this contributes to a pattern of secrecy that I think is becoming more and more evident to historians.
Well, what did the Russians finally make of this, and how did they react?
Well, the reaction was certainly one of puzzlement, and the Soviet ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Dobrinin, met with Nixon and Kissinger during this crisis and was attempting to figure out what they were doing. And what we know now that we didn't know before is when he was sending his account back to Moscow, we have that account now, he told the Soviet leadership that Nixon was out of control, that he believed that there were patterns of instability in Nixon, and that the Soviet leadership had to prepare to deal with that. He didn't say that he thought Nixon was actually going to launch a nuclear war. I don't think he believed that bluff. But he did come to believe that the president was unstable.
Well, this was called Operation Giant Lance, and how was Henry Kissinger involved in this? Did he really advise this as part of this strategy, this madman strategy that Nixon portrayed, and that some feel was perhaps the right thing because it accomplished something?
Well, Kissinger had thought about this for a long time. As I point out in the Wired article and in my book and other places, he had studied for a long time some of the basic concepts of game theory. He wasn't necessarily a game theorist, but he and Daniel Ellsberg and others had been working at Harvard in the late 1950s on this idea of the rationality of irrationality, that you could get your opponent or adversary to do things he or she wouldn't do otherwise if you could convince them that you were a little unpredictable, a little unstable. And Kissinger put this into action. Now, Nixon had come to the same conclusion, I think, through his experience as a card player. He had actually made a lot of money as a card player in the American Army, ripping off other soldiers. And they came to this idea independently of each other. But Kissinger really put it into operation. Nixon had the idea, but Kissinger put it into operation. He orchestrated this. He wrote the memos that explained what Nixon needed to do to actually pretend to be possibly launching a nuclear strike in a way that the Soviets would see and the American people would not. Kissinger authored that.
Well, let's look at how this was enacted. Although the American people didn't know about it, and many politicians didn't know about it, there certainly were people within the military that were a part of it. How many people within the military had to know about this little dirty secret?
Well,
and besides for knowing about the secret, how was this enacted? How long did it go on for? How long was this actual operation going on?
Yep. Well, the actual military operation is a matter of a few days. There are a few days that the planes are circling in the air with the nukes on board, approaching the Soviet border and turning back. But the order to get this all started is in early October, and the actual operations are in late October. So there's a 3-week period when this is all in process. The number of policymakers at the White House and the Pentagon and in the State Department who know about this is a very, very small group. But within the military, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who recognize something different is going on. One of the documents we put up on the Wired website, the print article doesn't have the documents in it, but the website article has the documents attached to it. One of the documents shows even the head of SAC, the Strategic Air Command, sending a message to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff asking, what the hell is going on? Why are we doing this? He doesn't know the answer, but he knows that strange things are going on. And there were people much lower down in the chain of command, those who were handling the nukes, those who were flying the aircraft, those who were navigating for the aircraft, who knew about this. They didn't know why the president was doing this, but they knew that the United States was playing around with nuclear weapons. And they kept that story secret.
We had last summer an incident where planes loaded with nuclear missiles were taking off from Barksdale Air Force Base. We're not sure where they were going, and afterwards several young airmen mysteriously died.